I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District. Let the record reflect that all board members are present. May we have a flag salute? Mr. Kildee, will you lead us in the flag salute?
Certainly. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. That'll bring us down to the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, are there any general public comments for the Camarillo Sanitary District? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent calendar. Do I have a
I'll move the
motion?
approval of consent.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. Moving down, we have no discussion items. Are there any board or staff member comments? Seeing none, I will move to adjourn this meeting.
All right, we'll reconvene this meeting of the regular meeting of January 10, 2024 of the Camarillo City Council. Let the record reflect that all council members are here. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we have two presentations tonight. The first presentation, we're really pleased to welcome aboard David Marin from the Ventura County Civic Alliance, who will be giving us the 2023 State of the Region report. Welcome aboard.
And
How about I turn on your lectern? There we go.
I thought it was intentional that you had it turned off, because you know me well. So I'm David Marin with the Ventura County Civic Alliance. Every 2 years, we produce the State of the Region report, looking at many issues and data across the county. For anyone in the audience or listening, this is available for free online. You can download it at civicalliance.org. We would not be able to distribute this around the county without the support of our sponsors. Here's a few of our larger ones: the Ventura County Community Foundation, the Ventura County Community College District, both longtime partners with the Civic Alliance. Also, some other additional sponsors: Era Energy, AT&T, Channel Islands University, Limonera, County of Ventura, and the Port of Hueneme. We're grateful to them, and all of our sponsors are listed on the inside back cover. Couple of places to start. One, you've seen these before, so I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. We list the census counts from 2021. At the bottom, we show the percentage in each city that's below 18 and above 65. You get a little feel for how you compare with the other cities, but I'd like to direct your attention up here. The median age. Back in 2000, Ventura County was 34.2. And we have steadily increased to an average age of 38.7. And that is not good news. We need to have more young people. We need to see that median age come down. Agriculture, strawberries continue to dominate. Agriculture is about a $2 billion industry in Ventura County, about 4.5% of our overall gross domestic product. And we export around the world our produce. Community engagement. Show you about the various libraries. Just quick item on here. Library funding is not necessarily the money that a city gives to its library. It's the total amount that that library spends. So they often have their own Friends of a Library that raises money and other things. So how your city, obviously doing well, Thousand Oaks leading the way. On the political party affiliation, you can see blue is Democrat, red is Republican, green is no party preference. Back around 2000, it was a little bit more Republicans in the area, plurality, but now that is dominated more by Democrats. And mostly Democrats haven't grown. It's just that the Republican Party is losing new registrations. They're going to the no party preference or they're switching. So Ventura County, more and more purple, maybe even a little bit blue. These are the individual cities. Only one city in Ventura County has a majority Republican, and that is Simi Valley. All the others have a higher percentage of Democrats than Republicans. Camarillo is a very nice balanced city as far as 38% to 34% Republican, but I can tell you just 4 years ago those numbers were almost equal. So even your town as well is seeing a growth in the Democrats' registrations. Nonprofit employment, I won't spend much time here other than to recognize that $473 million of wages are spent on nonprofits in Ventura County. 10,000 nonprofits in the county, and certainly a very important part of our sector as well. Economy, back in 2019, before the pandemic, we had pretty much our highest unemployment, around 312,000 there. We dipped because of the pandemic, but we're still not back to where we should be, and certainly growing. This is a list of the employment by first good producing, and then I'll look at service sector. Goods producing is like agriculture, manufacturing. This is where the high-paying jobs are. As far as manufacturing, you can see about 77,000. Mining pays even better, but there's very few jobs, less than 1,000 at that kind of salary. That's just some very skilled people in those areas. But you've heard me say this before, as far as manufacturing, the decline in jobs, it has plateaued and it's actually starting to grow. There are some initiatives in the county trying to bring back manufacturing, so that's a good sign for that industry. In the service sector, you can see that we've had a lot of growth in jobs, but unfortunately some of them are in the lower paying industry, like leisure and hospitality has grown, but it only pays about $29,000. Been some growth in the trades as far as transportation, utilities, and salaries have grown in the IT world, in the government sector. So a lot of information for you to dive in and look through. But we need to have a good balance. And our economy has been pretty much flat. When I've been here before, it's been the same story as far as we're just not growing. We peaked up a little bit there at the end, and these are inflation-adjusted dollars. So everything is calibrated to go all the way back to 2002. The one point I would make is that in the state, we have seen an uptick of actually significant growth in the economy, and nationwide, we've seen a growth in the economy. Ventura County is not part of that bandwagon. We just continue to flatline, and that's why we need those manufacturing companies and others to help our growth. Taxable sales, we break it out now by city based on the population. So you can see Camarillo here, about $22,000 per resident as far as taxable sales. So I think we have to give credit to the outlet malls for most of that. You can see, though, that the ones with vehicles, Oxnard and Thousand Oaks, have a much higher, or have a very high number as far as that goes. So all in all, Camarillo doing great on the taxable sales. And tourism, this shows, obviously the water-hugging communities of our county do much better. Camarillo, though, is holding its own, and it's shown some growth in the transient occupancy tax. That number for Ojai has been validated. It's when you have hotels like the Ojai Valley Inn and others that charge just say a large amount every night. There's a lot of TOT that comes with it. Education, this is what I want to direct your attention to in the sense of declining enrollment. At the beginning, I mentioned that our median age is getting higher and higher, and this is where we're seeing it show up, is that the drop in the number of students, the blue line up there is TK through 8th grade, and the green line is K through 12. And you can see that the numbers projected significant decrease from where we were just 10 years ago, 97,000, and we're looking at only 70,000 young people in another 7 or 8 years. So we are getting older, our young people are having less children, and they are waiting longer to have children. So how does that affect us? Well, although you don't manage education, certainly we will see a reduction in the number of schools that are needed. We may see school closures. We may see layoffs as this ripples through. Now, Camarillo hasn't done too badly. The high school district actually had a little bit of growth over here. But Pleasant Valley Unified, you can see, has lost about 500 students since 2019-20. So that's where we're looking. And some of the school districts that are in your reports, you can see have even much greater. Conejo Valley, Ventura Unified have both had a significant thing. I do like to show this slide every time because it is the value of education. Blue is male, green is female. And the longer you stay in school, the more it pays off in lifetime earnings. So you can see a high school male graduate, about $37,000 is what they can expect right now, but over their lifetime, compare that to almost $80,000 a year that they would get with a bachelor's degree. So almost double the earnings, and you multiply that by all the years of their life, it pays. And I like to make the argument that if your child or grandchild is debating about college and the huge cost of taking out loans, it's worth it if they're going to pursue that, because they can pay that back. And hopefully they get a lot of grants and other things. But same story for females, except we still have the inequality as far as wages with women. Land use, housing permits, we've stabilized here in the county. That number should be higher. It's not. I'm going to keep moving on here, though. Home ownership, the number of people who own their home is in blue, and higher percentage of homeowners generally means people are taking care of their neighborhoods, a little bit more attached to their community than renters, but it also reflects that there's a shortage of apartments to rent. So Camarillo doing very well as far as how the percentage. Here's the prices, you all know this. The green line is inflation adjusted, so surprisingly to some, our cost of a home, inflation adjusted, is actually a little lower than it was 15 years ago. But with inflation, we're way up in the 900,000 as of June. Every month sort of varies with the real estate market. So June is a high month, December is a lower month. But overall, you can see the trend. It's very expensive to live here. And we have the prices for you by community. This is a big one as far as apartment rents. So you can see that the average rent in Ventura County was $2,700 back at in 2023. And that was for a 2-bedroom apartment. So $2,700, I think most of us would remember when that was a mortgage, but today that's an apartment rent. And part of that reason is that the vacancy rate is so low. And that means landlords are in the driver's seat. They can have more stipulations to qualify. They can be very choosy about who they decide to rent because they're in the driver's seat. They have very little vacancy. Ventura has added a lot of stock in the last year, and they have a new place opening. We may see some changes, but you can see Camarillo about $2,600 for an apartment. Good news in the natural resources. We continue to add a great deal of solar energy in Ventura County. We are now up to about 230 megawatts of power, which is about almost about the size of one of those Edison plants out there in the Oxnard Plains. So we continue to add it. It's obviously very beneficial. Oil production, this is in the news a lot as far as that goes. There's a couple of reasons, but it's a long-term decline, what we're pulling out of the earth in this area. Certainly Ventura County in many ways was built on exploration for oil way back 100 years ago, Santa Paula and all that. And you can see that the numbers are much lower. Part of that is just economic. If the oil in the ground is only getting you $60 a barrel versus $100 a barrel, well, then the companies may not need to go through all the effort. And some of it's regulatory. It's just harder to drill here and expand. Average water use, obviously very important during the drought. You can see that Camarillo, with a couple of your water agencies, we've seen some nice declines as far as from 21 to 22. That's great. People are using less water pretty much across the board. The cities that are more inland with larger yards, they're going to use more water. Oxnard, Port Hueneme are about the lowest, and I think a lot of that is just the density. If you think about the number of people that live in a single house, it's denser, and so they just use less water because there's only one yard for that whole big family. Public health, you can read through this later, but I would like to emphasize this is a very important chart. We haven't had it before. But back in 1990, and if you recall, Ventura County was much smaller in 1990, that's 30 years ago. The average birth rate was about 19 births per 1,000 residents. That number has fallen to half. So as far as among our childbearing women in that age range, we're just not having the same number of kids. With a smaller population, we had over 12,000 births. In 2021, only 8,800 births in Ventura County. So this is where we just need to, I would suggest that both cities, businesses, and others can look at policies that might help promote family formation. Perhaps that's more convenient hours to some families to be able to go off and take care of kids. Informing the public about child care operations, supporting child care, that's always a hindrance. Many families feel that it's difficult to have the children because of the cost of child care. Well, California now offers more than pre-K, it's called TK, so 4-year-olds can now go to school. That reduces the burden on families, and soon it'll be 3-year-olds will be able to go to school part-time. So there's a lot of things that we need to communicate, I think, to our young people. And they'll say it's just so expensive to live here, but if there are policies that our private sector and public sector can do, I think we have to address this. You may ask, well, isn't that the same nationwide, David, that those numbers are going down? And yes, it is going down, but in the country, the rate of decline is half of what our decline is. California is significantly higher than what Ventura County. So there's something happening, I'll just say in our region. It may be coastal or something else, but we're just not seeing people deciding to have children. So go home and tell your kids. Opioid deaths. This chart is about the fentanyl-related deaths, but you can see that Ventura County had a significant rate, and this is per 100,000, so you may be surprised to see that LA County has a lower rate of fentanyl deaths than Ventura County. So really, Ventura and SLO were the top 2 counties as far as the number of fentanyl deaths. And just to put numbers to that, about 40 people in 2019, 4 times that amount in 2022. So continue to remind your family and others to be very careful where they get anything, medication and other things that may have fentanyl. Oh, wow, I've really way over. Sorry about that. So opioid deaths is in here. You can see where Camarillo matches up. Public safety, Ventura County is one of the safest large counties. Crime rate continues to decline. Each individual city, violent and property crime is in here as well. Social services, food share, homelessness you're very familiar with. And this is a new chart, the number of people that are working from home. Pandemic and Zoom, I think, led to this, but Ventura County now has over 10% of its working population that are working from home. And some of that translates into lower vehicle miles on the freeways. And this has been happening since before the pandemic, but our freeways are not as crowded as I think we all believe. Much less traffic on many of those. So I apologize for going a little long, but that's that. There's some other information if you're ever interested as far as how Camarillo ranks compared to other cities, but I'll just share with you that you're pretty solid in the middle with everything. And it's a great place to live. I live here, and I'm very happy. I'm sure everyone else is too. Thank you very much for your time.
David, thank you very, very much. We really appreciate you presenting this data to us. Do any of the council members have any questions regarding the data? Mr. Kildee and Mr. Tennyson.
It's not necessarily a question, but more of a comment, David. I really appreciate, although I don't always like all the statistics that you bring to us, but there's more positive than not. But I really appreciate you doing this. And I, through the years, I refer to this extensively. I know it's a lot of work, and you could thank all your staff and your board of directors. It doesn't go unnoticed. It's really important, especially in these times that we live in, to know as much statistical analysis as we can get here. And like you say, we're poised to do some great things, but like always, we've got room to grow in several areas as well. But I appreciate you coming. I always look forward to this meeting. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'll share your comments, Kevin, or Councilmember Kildee, with the board.
Thank you.
Mr. Tennyson.
David, thank you. Great document. I enjoyed the annual event when this was released. 2 real quick questions. One was on public school enrollment. Did that take into consideration any kind of growth in private schools or the number of students that are homeschooled in our community?
I'm asked that question a lot. The best information I have is it doesn't really reflect homeschool, but statistically, homeschool would not make the difference that we're seeing. So we're not seeing that most of that is homeschool. Charters are still included in those counts. There's just people that are moving out of the area. We all know that it's expensive and our young people tend to move away. So there's a couple of factors, but it's not just homeschooling.
Okay, and the second question is earnings by education, and a lot of the focus is on two-year and four-year colleges. Is there any data on trade schools and the number of young people that are going the trade route versus traditional education?
The data comes from the U.S. Census on that particular one. It's called the American Community Survey. I haven't seen it necessarily broken out by actual trades, but I think we all know that beyond a degree, community colleges offer certificates. You get a certificate in certain radiology technician and all of those pay much better. Right. So staying in school, even for a certificate, if somebody's motivated in mechanical engineering or something else, it's valuable.
I know we have a local charter school, ACE, a high school, and they share information how their students graduating from high school are going straight into the trades and the amount of money they make with a high school diploma. Is that kind of data available?
Not that I know of, but I haven't really looked deeply for that, so I'll try to see what I can find.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Martinez-Bravo.
David, thank you so much. And I'm a total nerd, so I love looking at all the graphs. I appreciate all of the data. I think when I went to your event, what really struck me was the increase in the median age, the decline in enrollment, and how different, as you say, private and public sectors are going around to try to attend to those variables. And I know that Meissner Filtration, for example, they've done a wonderful job in terms of providing a summer break for families who have children, providing more flexibility for those who have families. And I think all of those are great things to take into account because, people, yes, there's a high cost of living, but I think there is a lot more that both private and public sectors can do. So that's more of a comment. And then the question that I do have, and as we are approaching Dr. Martin Luther King Day, I'm thinking about inequities. When looking at different variables, if we look at wage inequality, for example, we know that, yes, while you indicated there is a wage inequality difference between men and women, is there any future research or data analysis in terms of the differences in ethnicities? Because I do know that within women, Latina women are at the very bottom of that wage inequality. So I just want to understand if there's any vision to include some of those variables.
Always interested in suggestions how to improve the report. That data is available nationally. I think we all sort of know the statistics about who does better in the economy. That's a great idea to look at if we could bring some of that into the next report. And on the topic of Meissner, I mean, it's great that Camarillo and other cities have enlightened employers who are helping all that. And as much as we all talk about trying to attract businesses here, I think we all have an obligation in a way to acknowledge and to commend those employers that are doing the job right here in the community. So I agree with you completely.
Thank you.
I just have a comment. I wanted to thank you, David, for being here. I really look forward to this. I'm sort of a data nerd too, so I really like having it handy so that I can look things up and see if my feelings about things are really borne true in the data. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
David, thank you again. It's a highlight every year for me. I don't want to be repetitive with what Councilmember Santangelo said, but it's a highlight for me every time when I go to this. And it's actually nice to have a new one because my 2023 is already well thumbed. So now I have a brand new one, even over the course of the last couple of months. What I especially appreciate is how nimble and the hours and hours that you and your board and your volunteers take to analyze this data, and how nimble you are in terms of coming up with the new slides. And the slides that you come up with, I find to be highly relevant. I find them to be highly useful So I really appreciate your time and the fact, when you're open to suggestions about explicating new data, and I know that you are because we've had a chance to converse on that, and I know that you're very open to it. So all in all, it's a real great service that you provide, so I want to thank you. Do you want to just say one more time for the website for the Civic Alliance, where people can find? Is there a page for that? So I can give you a chance to plug it real quickly here?
Civicalliance.org. I don't have the screen up, but you can go there and you click on View Report, and you can read it online or you can download it, and it's open to everybody. I did bring copies for staff and city manager, Mr. Ramirez. If you want more for your team, just let me know. Be happy to continue to provide that, and I left a few in the back for anybody that comes in later.
And not that I've ever been known to be repetitive, but again, that's www.civicalliance.org,
Yeah,
in case you want to.
Well,
Okay.
I
All right.
appreciate the-
Thank you again very much.
Thank
We
you
really
all.
appreciate your
Good
presentation.
to see you all.
Thank you. All right. We're going to move on then to our second presentation under item D, which is the Ventura Council of Governments Broadband Working Group. Welcome aboard.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you. I believe this is, okay. Good evening. Thank you so much for having us and for allowing us to spend a few minutes just sharing what's going on with the Broadband Strategic Project. I'm Vivian Vasquez. I work with the EDC, and I'm here with Dr. Bill Simmons, who's our technical expert as part of the Broadband Project. And this is purely an informational update. Just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the project, what's going on, and how your city has already been involved, and just ask for a little bit of your time. So in terms of the agenda, what I'd like to share, I'm going to talk a little bit about, at the state level, the Broadband for All, and how this project has come to be. Then I'll talk a little bit about our project plan and activities, what that timeline will look like, and then also what you can expect in terms of the outcomes for the region as well as for Camarillo, and what we'd ask for you to consider. In terms of the legislation, we have a bunch of legislation up here at the state level, but the overview of it is that, as we all know, COVID really showed how important internet and connectivity is, not just in employment, but also healthcare, education. Broadband infrastructure became really, really critical and important. And so because of that, there was a bunch of legislation passed at the federal and state level, giving funds to making sure that there's technical assistance and infrastructure for broadband. So as part of SB 156, which is the first bullet under the California Broadband for All square up there, that has funded us to be able to do this technical assistance project to make sure that this area has a regional plan for broadband. In terms of what we're planning as part of this project, there's a couple different parts to it, and I'll talk a little bit about each. First being convenings, which is something that we've already started. We've convened a VCOG broadband working group, and we have George Winkler from your city who's been very involved in that. And so we have representatives from each city convening them every month to talk about what's going on with this project and how we can be aligned in terms of broadband infrastructure. We are now in the phase of going into data collection, and I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. But we're collecting both qualitative and quantitative information about what speed people actually are experiencing when it comes to their internet. Also hearing from your residents and during community engagement events, which we're hoping to start later this fall, and just to get people's experiences with internet and what's on their mind. As part of that data collection, we want to be able to analyze that data and make some maps. And the reason why that's so important is because we want to look at what the priority areas are and who's disconnected, where broadband really needs to be focused on. And when we think about the funding that's coming down, we need to be thinking about what those areas are that are really critical in terms of broadband infrastructure. Part of this convenings and the working group that we're doing is really focused on coordination. We want to make sure that all the cities are talking to each other about broadband, making sure that we're not duplicative in our efforts and that we're aligning where need be. In terms of the timeline, we're a few circles in, but I'll start back in November. So we started convening the working groups and having these meetings, and then we started doing some mapping and going to all the different city councils and giving them information about what we're working on. And we just had our first working group meeting of the year this week. And this is where we're really starting to get into the data collection mode. So we have already shared with your representative for the working group the surveys and speed testing that is going out. So we're asking for your support in getting the word out about the speed tests and surveys. These are just very brief surveys to understand what the actual broadband is that people have and what they're experiencing. That survey is both in English and in Spanish. And then we also have some speed testing, which is just when you click a button, either on your phone or on your computer, and it sends information to Ookla, who we've contracted with. They're a data service provider, and they will tell us, okay, this is what people are actually experiencing, even if an internet service provider says this is the speed, and then we'll validate that based off of what those speed tests are telling us. So that's really important to make sure that people are actually getting the speed that they're paying for. And then after that, we will start to work into analysis and planning later this spring. And then we'll be working on community engagement events. So that's where we'll be doing one event per city, doing kind of like a town hall style event where folks can come and talk about what's important to them as we think about broadband infrastructure, what are their pain points, and how can we make sure that those are addressed as part of this plan. Lastly, as we get into the later months of the spring, we'll be using that qualitative and quantitative information to develop an overall regional strategy for Ventura County when it comes to broadband. And as part of that regional plan, we'll have chapter pullouts for each of the cities. So Camarillo will have its own chapter to talk about what your broadband assets are, what are some of the points that you could potentially work on in the future as funding comes down, what are the opportunities. And so that will be part of that overall strategy. In terms of the outcomes, as I mentioned, we are hoping to be able to share with you as part of that report a strategy for the region as well as your city. We will also be creating, through the data we're collecting, a bunch of mapping tools and GIS mapping, which is really helpful to be able to kind of understand what those priority areas are and who needs the most support as we think about broadband. And then, as I mentioned, also just thinking about how the cities can work together and communicate when it comes to the funding that is already coming down, but will continue to come down next year and the year after from the federal level. In terms of what we're asking from you all, we're not asking for any funding, just for continued support in this project as we think about what information needs to be shared among the cities, and also making sure that we're all coordinated in that process. And we already very much appreciate the time that George has been able to dedicate to the group and being able to share and communicate that information. And now as we enter the data collection phase, we'll definitely make sure that we're sharing that information with you all and continuing to stay in communication. And that is it in terms of the brief update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from any members of the council? No, not even questions for Dr. Simmons, who's here too? Gee. Well, Ms. Vasquez and Dr. Simmons, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for all of your work on this project. I remember when I was on the EDC-VC board several years ago, this was a hot topic, and it continues to be, and it continues to be a highly important topic. So we really appreciate all of the good work that you've been doing on this, and thanks for sharing with us this time. And I guess we'll look forward to seeing you back in our city in the not-too-distant future, right, for our workshop. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. With that, we're now going to go ahead and go to council and staff comments and reports. Who would like to start us off? Mr. Tennyson.
I'll be quick. Happy New Year, since this is our first council meeting. I've been pretty lazy in the last month. I attended a December 14th Economic Development and Land Use Committee meeting with Councilmember Santangelo, and that's it.
Mr. Kildee.
Happy New Year to everyone, and that's all I have.
Wow, this may turn out to be brief. Councilmember Santangelo, what you got next?
Happy New Year, everybody. I attended the Economic Development and Land Use Committee on December 14th, and that is all. That's all I have.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo.
And Happy New Year. On December 22nd, I attended the Ventura Training Center Firefighter Program graduation, and I have to say I absolutely loved it. The fact that these were individuals who in their past life had made some mistakes and now we're given a second chance, and that second chance was to become firefighters. There was not a dry eye in the room. It was a wonderful experience. Right before the holidays, I also met with the Executive Director of Interfaith Children and Family Services, and so I got a printout of the impact that they have here in our city of Camarillo for the 211 program. So I got that for all of you there, and that is the end of my reports.
Thank you very much. Gosh, everyone has been very short this evening, so I'm really under the gun here, but I do have a few things to mention. For meetings attended, December 21, the CASA, California Association of Sanitation Agencies statewide board meeting, another meeting of the CASA board on December 27. On January 5, the Mayor's Selection Committee meeting. Also on January 5, we had a VCTC meeting. And just to let you know that I've been appointed as a regular member of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency Board of Directors for a 2-year term commencing on March 1 of 2024, and Councilmember Santangelo has been appointed as an alternate member of LAFCO for this next year. So thank you for your service on that, Susan. Okay, a couple of announcements. This is the time in the announcement. Anyway, announcements, but I got to make them. Beginning February of 2024, that's next month, all City Council and Planning Commission meetings will be temporarily held in the community room of the Camarillo Public Library, located at 4101 Los Pozos Road, and this is to accommodate a full remodeling of these City Council chambers. So during the period of construction, all of the regularly scheduled public city meetings will be held in person at the Camarillo City Library. Camarillo Public Library will continue to be live streamed on the city's YouTube channel for full access by the community. The meetings will be played on the government channel following the meeting. So you may be on 2 different cable TV. You can still continue to get it on Frontier or Spectrum, but as I understand it, will be following the meeting that the televised meetings will occur. As always, for all information on city meetings and agendas, you can please visit the City of Camarillo website for cityofcamarillo.org/meeting-info. And finally, please note that for outside agencies, and I know that we've been getting requests, for outside agencies who typically use this room for their meetings, please check that agency's agenda to learn about their new meeting location for meetings in 2024. So, did we cover that okay from a housekeeping standpoint? Okay. It'll be interesting having meetings in the community room of the library. That will be a whole new, as we tell our grandson, adventure. So, that brings us to a discussion item for wireless facilities information session, and I'm wondering, that will probably go for, what do we expect on that?
Do you want to do the consent calendar?
I suppose we could do the consent calendar. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the consent calendar. Are there any council members who, thank you for the reminder, Christy. Are there any council members who want to pull anything from consent? All right, hearing none, do we have a motion?
Move approval.
I'll withdraw.
Okay, I think tie goes to the runner. I think I heard a motion from Councilmember Tennyson.
Did.
And a second from Councilmember Martinez Bravo. Any discussion? Please vote. All right, then consent calendar items are adopted on a 5-0 vote. Thank you for the reminder, Madam City Clerk. And we have a discussion item for wireless facilities information session. Can I inquire about how long that will be? Because I'm mindful of the fact that it's about 20 to 6. About 5 minutes? Let's go ahead and do that. And we will welcome to the podium Ms. Michelle Dana, Assistant to the City Manager, and we want to thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members of the City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening to present to you this information session. The city has received multiple calls from residents and businesses who are dissatisfied with their wireless service in Camarillo. And so we are here this evening because we want to share information with you and the community about what we know and what we can do. It's important to emphasize that the city is not directly responsible for installing wireless facilities, so we are limited in what we can do. However, we are involved in the process from a permitting standpoint, and we wanted to share some information on permitting history and siting information so that you're aware of the information that we have at this time. First, I want to acknowledge Broadband Consortium, who presented to you earlier this evening. This initiative started because broadband is essential infrastructure for cities and communities, and having high-speed internet connectivity influences business growth, retention, and attraction. So key initiatives in the Broadband Consortium include assessing fiber infrastructure and identifying gaps in service, advocacy for local broadband strategy and policy adoption, as well as deployment of fiber in underserved areas. And as part of their efforts, as you heard, Broadband Consortium is working with the City of Camarillo to help connect us to cellular service providers so that we can better understand those service gaps. In November, city staff met with Broadband Consortium and some of the local wireless providers. So we are leading the way in communicating with them to not only represent the needs of the community, but to understand the needs from those companies. We did learn that the providers have multi-year expansion plans to close gaps in coverage. So this is an issue that they are working on. Some of the limiting factors that they face that are completely out of the city's control include budget constraints, site constraints, and profitability requirements. So from the city standpoint, we took a look at the wireless applications that have been submitted to the city over the last 20 years, and this is what the data shows. In 20 years, the city has received 62 applications for new wireless facilities. 60 of those applications were approved by the city. Of those 60, 27 are currently active. And of those 27, 92 modifications have been processed and approved by the city for those facilities. In addition to the 27 active sites, we currently have 7 sites that are entitled, which means that the applicants are working on building permits. So these sites could become active if the applicants continue down the path. It is also interesting to note that 26 of those applications that the city approved were withdrawn by the applicant. So that means that the applicant either allowed the permit to expire or the sites have been decommissioned. So we took this information and we mapped the active wireless facilities, so those 27 facilities, so that we could visually demonstrate where they are in the city. We are planning on converting this data to a public-facing map, and that will allow the residents to have this information. Our plan is to create a trending topics webpage where we can share information. Information, was that me? Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We are planning on putting this map, the public-facing map, as well as information from this presentation, on a Trending Topics webpage so that we can better share this information with the community. We do intend to have the public-facing map ready by the end of January, and so that is the timing of the webpage that we plan to launch. We also have this information that visually helps tell the story about wireless service in Camarillo. So these are considered defunct wireless facilities, which means that they've been decommissioned and they're no longer in service. And then staff also obtained this map from the Ventura County Planning Department. And so this shows wireless facilities that have been permitted by the County of Ventura. They are within the unincorporated area outside of Camarillo city limits, but it is important information because these facilities do help provide coverage in Camarillo. And one quick bit of information about understanding coverage. It's important to understand that just because we have facilities within a location on a map, Coverage is still a critical factor in determining service. So this is an example of a coverage map. It goes from green to yellow to pink because of terrain and buildings. When they interfere with the signal from the facility, that affects coverage. So in order to have everything in the green, which is what would be ideal service, this would require the addition of new wireless facilities to essentially fill in the gaps in the coverage. Another interesting piece of information is that each of the carriers has their own coverage maps, and they all use different frequencies, so that requires separate facilities for each carrier. So I want to touch on the city's role in wireless permitting. From the city's standpoint, these are the aspects of this process that we can control. The city permits wireless applications for new sites as well as modifications to existing sites. We inspect installations as part of the building permit process, and then we verify that the facilities comply with FCC regulations regarding emissions. So that's the information I have to present to you this evening. Again, this is intended to be an information session for the City Council, so we are not requesting any action. This concludes staff's presentation.
Michelle, thank you very much. I know that we have at least one public speaker on this, but before we hear from that gentleman, do any members of the council have questions for Michelle on this? Let's start with Mr. Kildee, and Mr. Tennyson's on deck.
Yeah, Michelle, is that, when you compare and contrast about the number of potential improvements, is that about a normal amount? I mean, in other words, I think you said, I believe it was 27 sites. When we do an analysis, is that, do they look at that when they come in and service a particular part of a city? Do they look at the demand and how many sites that they'll need, or is that something that's just done from a corporate standpoint?
That is part of it, but it's also coupled with the limiting factors as far as, they've been sharing with us. So they do look at that, but they also do have site constraints and budget constraints, and then they're looking at profitability on their end.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's just kind of since I've been here, it's kind of always been somewhat of a work in progress, and it keeps being that way to a certain extent?
I think that's a fair way to put it, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Tennyson.
First, a comment. I've had several residents reach out to me about this issue and lack of cell phones, claiming it's a public safety hazard. And again, I know the city can't force these cell phone companies to put them in. Do we have any idea on the number of landlines that are still being used versus cellular only?
We may have data. I don't know if we have the data right now about who uses what, but I can tell you that all of our developments have the infrastructure in place for residents to choose a landline. So even in the newer communities, some of which we've been hearing from, where residents are not getting cell service, they do have the option to pay for a landline if public safety is a concern in that regard.
I may be unusual, but I haven't had a landline since I retired in 2011. Fortunately, with broadband in the house, I can make Wi-Fi phone calls. I've tried all three service providers over the last 2.5 years, and none of them have coverage that allows Camarillo residents to use them throughout the city. The only option would be to have 3 separate cell phones with 3 separate service providers. So I'm hoping that the city's involvement will encourage some of the cell phone cellular service providers to try and increase coverage in and around Camarillo.
Other questions? I want to echo Councilmember Tennyson's observations on that. Michelle, could we go back a few slides? If we dial it back to the initial slide on the number of applications and actual facilities. Okay, so this is a slide where we've got 62 applications. I just want to clarify, 60 applications of those 62 were approved, correct?
Correct.
And then out of those 60, 27 are active sites, 7 are entitled, but then 26 were withdrawn out of the 60, right? That's all a function out of the 60?
Yes.
And then the 92 modifications, those have been to the 27 active sites?
That's correct.
Okay. And then can we dial back another slide to the discussions with the providers? So, first of all, I want to salute you and city staff because we've asked for a presentation like this, and we really appreciate the amount of effort that goes into it. And I know with respect to the engagement that you're doing, Mr. Winkler and others are doing with our providers, it's very helpful. Can you elaborate at all on the providers having multi-year expansion plans to close the gaps? Have there been any specifics revealed to city staff on that, or has it been sort of a generalized statement? Well, we've got a plan to close these gaps. Because like Mr. Tennyson, well, I have a lot of people who have reached out to me, and particularly in the area of the city, District 4 that I represent, I'm privileged to represent, for example, in the Grove, there are many people who are encountering real difficulty in cell phone coverage. So anyway, do you have any more specifics on these multi-year expansion plans?
At this point, no. That is the information that we received when we had that initial meeting with the wireless providers in November. And the information for some providers is proprietary. They're reluctant to share a lot of the information with us, at least at this time, which is why we are really working on those relationships and trying to work on those relationships with the assistance of Broadband Consortium so that we can help them help our residents.
Right, and I appreciate the fact that that's the beginning. It's the real beginning of the discussion. And again, looking at the limiting factors, budget constraints, site constraints, and profitability requirements, those are all beyond our city's control. That's more a function of free market, correct?
That's correct.
Right. But at the same time, there are things that the city might, what, if anything, could the city do to incentivize? There's another slide. I know you're bouncing back and forth between the slides, but there's another slide up here. Yeah, city's role in wireless permitting. Just generally speaking, what, if anything, could the city do to incentivize carriers in this respect?
We took a look at our ordinance. Our ordinance is up to date. I think the data shows that the ordinance and the design guidelines we have in place aren't, prohibiting wireless providers from submitting applications. That really, the data shows that it's on their end for not following through with the applications. So at this point, we're not aware of anything specific that we need to necessarily change, in our code or our citing guidelines. But we're trying to get a better understanding from their perspective of if there is anything we need to do, or if there's any way that we can help impede any of the barriers that they're facing.
Okay, all right. And I guess if I'm in the carrier's position, they would also be looking, for example, at the permitting fees and the availability of facilities and those functions, right?
Yes, and so far the communications with them haven't indicated that we have anything, fee-related or code-related that is impeding their progress.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you very much for that. Any other questions from members of the council before I call for public comments on this? All right. I have a speaker card. Thank you, Michelle, very much. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. I have a speaker card for Mr. Roger Chittum. Mr. Chittum, welcome aboard, and you have 3 minutes for comments. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. My name is Roger Chittum, and I live near Spanish Hills. I very much appreciate the council's addressing our spotty cell phone coverage, which is an embarrassment in a city where all other services are excellent. More importantly, it's a health and safety problem. I dug into my files and found a memorandum that I wrote in June of 2018 when Councilman Tremblay and city staff and I met with Verizon to ask all these same questions. And I got to say, the answers were pretty much the same then. They admitted that the 4G LTE network was incomplete, but when finished, they expected it would displace residential need for a fast internet connection. In other words, they're competing with cable, they thought. They said they needed more macro towers in Camarillo and planned to complete them in 2021. Installing more small cells would follow that. They reported past problems getting permits in Camarillo, but apparently they weren't complaining about that any longer in 2018. They said they had no budget for installations in Camarillo, and they indicated that a lot of the locations where we might want small cells are not profitable for them. So I guess that's not changed. It continues to be true, I think, that no carrier has good coverage everywhere in the city. Here are some of the problems that we have. I stopped giving out my cell phone number, because calls were frequently poor quality or dropped, just like 30 years ago. I stopped my home security system, installer connected monitoring through the cellular network. It didn't work, so I connected to the landline instead. When the EMTs came to my home, they could not communicate with the ER using their cell phone, which they do for privacy reasons. Tradesmen at my home can't talk to their customers or process payments. Lori Bennett, who owns a fence company, posted on Nextdoor today that she cusses out Verizon daily as she tries to do mobile business in Camarillo. Many of us have had to install secure Wi-Fi systems in our homes so our cell phones automatically work, but that isn't a good solution for visitors, especially strangers. So with that, I want to thank you for addressing this issue. I hope we'll get some movement.
Mr. Chittum, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Chittum? I want to thank you personally for being here. I know that this is an issue. It's hard to believe it's been 5.5 years, then interrupted by a pandemic, since we first started having these conversations. And I think it's important to note that this is an issue that it deserves continuing work on by city staff, and I'm really happy with that they have taken the reins and initiated these discussions. I agree with you. I think it's a public health and safety issue, fundamentally, and I think we need to do whatever we can to try to encourage some improvements in the cell phone coverage in our city. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. I also note that all of us received several public comments from members of the public on this issue. So it is one that has caught our attention. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you all.
Were there any other speakers on this particular item? Michelle and George, I want to thank you for your work on it, and thank city staff for your work on this, and we look forward to seeing more or hearing about the continuing conversation with the carriers going forward. All right. With that, we have general public comments at 6 p.m. The challenge here is that it's not quite 6 o'clock yet. So I want to try to, and I know we're going to have speaker cards coming in, what I would like to do is take a short 5-minute recess, and so we wait until, in case there's anybody else who is expecting public comments at 6 o'clock. So why don't we take a 5-minute recess, come back, and then we'll go ahead with public comments for items not on the agenda. So we are in recess for 5 minutes. Be back in. Will be 6 p.m. our general public comments. Let me just go through a few rules for our public comments. We allow 3 minutes per speaker, and I do enforce that. There is a timer that's in front of you. It will give you a 1-minute warning. And then when it comes to the 3-minute mark, we ask that you conclude your comments. We do not allow yielding of time to another speaker. Please try not to be cumulative. If someone has already said what you want to say, we have a little tradition on council. You can just say ditto if you like, and we know what you're going to say. Ask you to please state your name. I'll call the names of a speaker. I'll call the name of the person who's going to speak next, and I'll just say that they're on deck so that you know you're on deck. It's almost baseball season, so not quite yet. So thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and start. And our first speaker is Michelle Sevilla, and on deck is Philip Hall, Jr.
Good evening, Mayor Tremblay and council members. It's nice to see you again. Happy New Year. Again, my name is Michelle Sevilla, for those of you who are tuning in online, and I am Assemblymember Steve Bennett's Communications Director, and I'm also resident of the Los Posas area. And I'm delighted to share that the Assemblymember is having his second annual coffee and conversation gathering for the city on Saturday, January 20th from 10 a.m. to 11:30 at Room 6 in the Community Center on Burnley Street. We are providing coffee, tea, and treats, and welcome residents to drop by for an intimate conversation directly with the Assembly member and provide any thoughts and input on state, local, and legislative issues affecting our community. And we, of course, invite you and your staff and any Camarillo resident. I know that Camarillo is split between Assemblymember Irwin's district, but we welcome all kinds of feedback, no matter where you're from. And we look forward to having a conversation with you. We encourage people to RSVP at asmdc.org. So that's Alpha Sierra Mike Delta Charlie.org/Bennett, BENNETT, to ensure that we have enough provisions for everyone, and look forward to seeing you there. And I distinctly remember that Councilmember, now Vice Mayor Kildee was there, so hope to see you and some of your staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sevilla. And again, that website for the RSV is asm.dc.org. Sorry, bringing you back up. Just making sure.
Yes, thank you. asmdc.org.
Okay.
So no dots, yes. So
Great.
asmdc.org/Bennett.
Just want to be sure I heard you right. Okay, thanks very much. All right, our next speaker is Philip Hall, Jr., to be followed by, on deck, by Philip Hall.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I believe you've all received a packet, or at least I sent it. I understand some have received a packet that I provided before public comment today. We're here today because a wall has been built at 651 Corte Castano. To give you a little background, I've been doing nothing but land use law for 20-plus years of being an attorney. I'm currently, and not that it has anything to do with this particular case, but to give you my expertise, I'm the planning law attorney for County of Kern. I represent them at all planning commissions, and I'm very familiar with planning codes, land use, easements, et cetera. And that's one of the reasons I'm so confused by this matter. We now have a situation where this wall was built. It was built after my father came in and was told he could build it at this location multiple times. That makes sense. The code for the zoning, Title 19, 1938, provide many instances where this wall can be built on the lot line. You'll see a picture later from my parents' house. You can see multiple walls from their house, from standing in front of this wall, that are essentially on the same exact location, running along the easement. I know today is only public comment, so you can't act on anything, but you can set this for a future agenda item. Future agenda items could be dealing with the encroachment permit. The encroachment permit appeal we've tried to file but have been unable to file so far and been kept from doing. And that's really what we would like you to do. I have the appeal here today, a form provided that I can submit to you if you'd like. But that's really what we're asking, is that you give us a chance to talk to you, because this really is a situation that deals with your policy choices and what you want to do as a city regarding your planning and your designs. We believe that there's a issue, as you've seen in the documents we've submitted, where there's conflicting statutes, I guess, code sections maybe. There's one general section that we think is being used where specific ones really should be applied. Unfortunately, because of the way this has played out so far, we are now on a 90-day clock. We're about 20 days into that 90-day clock, or 12 days into that 90-day clock, where we'll have to file a writ against the city if we can't figure this out, because my parents are both disabled, elderly. They can't afford to remove this $50,000 improvement. And frankly, based on what the city's position is, which is inside this site triangle, they can build nothing. There's no way. How do you have any security fencing on this property with this site triangle? This is what my parents have been faced from day one. After they were told they could build it, they built it. They built it in what I believe is directly in line with the code, as you've seen from my submissions. And this is what we're faced with.
Mr. Hall, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Philip Hall, to be followed by Kathy Long.
My father won't be speaking. He's got a heart condition, and this will send him into another heart attack.
All right. Then we'll go ahead and proceed to our next speaker. Is Kathy Long, to be followed by Connie Hall, who will be on deck.
I mean, I've asked before, but now you're saying you won't take it because it doesn't have a check.
Mr. Hall, we'd like to proceed with our next speaker. All right.
Good evening,
Kathy
Mr.
Long.
Mayor and council members. Good to see you tonight, and Mr. Mayor, I'm sure the other guy looks worse. I'm speaking
No, it's my
tonight.
dermatologist. Never get in an argument with a dermatologist with a scalpel.
I'm speaking tonight as a neighbor and a little bit as a former county supervisor. I live at 220 Calle Converse, which is slightly up the hill from the Hall Street. I travel this street weekly, many times. I know the curves, the speed limit, the sight signs. I follow the speed, I slow on the curves, and I've examined the intersection, and from a layperson read, I don't see sightline issues or right-of-way issues. A few years ago, before retiring as supervisor, I was able to assist Halls in a serious issue they and the neighborhood were having with the gas company on old underground pipes, poor connections that led to ongoing gas leakage and smells and safety concerns. I found then the Halls to be very reasonable, patient, and engaged in getting results for the entire neighborhood. Mr. Hall Sr. discussed the situation you're hearing tonight with me in passing at a grocery store and a restaurant twice. He did not solicit my engagement, I offered. The materials you received provide all the details. I'm not going to go through them, other than to say consistency and fairness and application of the codes is all any constituent asks of their city and the leadership. I'm not an expert. I've probably forgotten 50% of what I knew on land use planning, different from the city, of course, at the county, but I genuinely feel is that an injustice has occurred and common sense has been lost in the path that has taken us here today. Now, the Hall's recourse seems to rest with all of you in taking a look at the process, the timeline, and the stalemate they currently are in. I believe them that they don't wish to litigate, but the resolution should not be demolishing a wall that is similar to multiple homes in their neighborhood. Experience says there's always another side to the story. So tonight, all they ask of you and all I would ask that you do is to review the entire record, provide clear direction to resolve this issue, and to really help the Halls to get this so they know a clear path. I thank you for your consideration of this tonight. Thank you. Good to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Thank you, Supervisor Long. It's good to see you. Our next speaker is Connie Hall, to be followed on deck by Stanley Gonzalez.
Good evening. I am the homeowner, and I really don't have a lot to say. I have a picture. I want to show you what I see out of my office every morning. And right out of my office is the first 4 homes are all got sidewalks adjacent to their block walls. So I can't understand how we have 4 homes that can have a block wall up next to the sidewalk, but we can't. It's almost like we're being bullied by the city, and I don't understand this. Thank you. I brought pictures for everyone too.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stanley Gonzalez and Harvey Webb. Mr. Harvey Webb will be on deck.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for listening to me today. I just wanted to say that this particular case is very interesting because we had a drug rehab house introduced into our neighborhood. And the reason why this wall was built in the first place was because there were safety concerns for the halls. They're elderly, they had a chain link fence, and with the introduction of this house, at the beginning, we actually have people on video dealing drugs on the street. We've never seen anything like it. Since then, we've had talked to the drug rehab house, and they've made some major improvements. But they were feeling very uncomfortable, and they were really fearing for their safety. So it prompted this wall. The halls are some of the nicest people you could ever meet. These people will go out of their way to help anyone. He will commonly go to people's houses, fix their plumbing for free. If someone doesn't have the means to pay, he'll go up there and just do it. These are the kind of people that I would like you to consider another alternative for. This is not a person that is nefarious in any way. Everything they do is for helping people in our community, and I would hope that you would reconsider or look at alternatives for the Hall family. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Harvey Webb, to be followed by Michelle Van Ast Spruell. I may have mispronounced that, and I'm going to apologize in advance. Mr. Webb.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Rather than take your time with narrative, I have prepared a narrative with some suggestions as ways that we can resolve this issue, and I hope it'll be helpful to you, and I want to just give you each a copy of it and not take any more time this evening.
Yes, please provide that to the city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Michelle Van Ast Spruill, thank you very much for bailing me out. And on deck will be Craig Spruill.
Hi. Everybody made already really good points, and sorry, I'm going kind of off the cuff with this. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, I'm just kind of going by the seat of my pants. This whole thing started by the city saying that that wall wasn't safe for cars, that they were worried for traffic accidents. But we have complained on our street, on Manzano, which is like the T of the Hall Street, of accidents happening on that street due to very fast driving. We have a curve at the top, and there's a house that's been run into 2 times. A truck has been run into once just from people who cannot negotiate this turn at this high rate of speed that they're doing. So it seems disingenuous that the city is worried about the wall safety when there's actual problems happening on the street right in front of the wall that has nothing to do with the wall, by the way. The wall is here, and the turn is going up Manzano. So I don't understand why the big fuss over this wall safety when there has never been a car accident there, but around the corner, there's been 3. And nobody's done anything, and they've put some speed check things to make sure that people are doing 25. They're not. And in the middle of the night, when they come home at 2 in the morning, they can't negotiate that turn. We've asked for speed bumps. And I know this is all separate issues, but it just makes it seem very disingenuous that this wall is such a concern when there is a real concern, like 2 houses up. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now call on Craig Spruill, to be followed by Stephen Johnson.
Good evening. Neighbor, we live across the street as she's...
Could you bring that mic just up a little bit more? There we go.
We're neighbors across the street from the halls on Manzano that tees up to that cul-de-sac. I don't have anything really extra to say that people haven't said before, or looking at alternatives, which Mr. Webb has submitted as our neighborhood watch representative as well. So I just want to say ditto, I guess, at this point, and there's a lot of good points made looking for alternatives. I hope we can come to a compromise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stephen Johnson is our next speaker. And I believe at least the last speaker I have a card for, so if anybody else wants to put in a card, this would be a good time. Mr. Johnson.
Good evening. I'm Phil Hall's son-in-law. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Phil himself. Phil is a plumber, and he's a plumber who, when he walks into a customer's home, if there's a code violation in that home, he explains to them how to fix that code violation, and if they don't want to do it, he walks off the job. He doesn't take the job. He is adamant about buildings being up to code. And in this case, he made sure he was covered before he built the wall by the code. At this house, quite often, I can tell you myself, there's nothing wrong with this wall. It does not block it. There is no line of vision block at all. There are houses all over the neighborhood that have the same setup with the wall being built right on the sidewalk. I'd also ask you to look around at all the neighbors who are here. Wall's been up for 2 years. In 2 years, these neighbors haven't had a problem with it. They don't see a problem with it. Nobody sees a problem with it other than some petty person in planning who has an issue with this wall. And I want to make sure you understand that because of this petty nuisance complaint, all these people have had to spend a ton of time working, getting involved in this so that the issue could go away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I have no other speaker cards with me. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the City Council on either this or any other non-agenda item? Sir, if you want to step forward and address the council, please. If you could just provide us with your name and...
Yes, my name is Peter Owen, and I had been informed that there was a big kerfuffle about motorhome parking on several streets in Camarillo, and that they were going to adjust the parking regulations, and that this had been, I tried to look on your website to find specific information, and I got some general information that this had been brought up on December 13th, and that it was going to be voted on tonight, and that signs were going to be made and posted, but I haven't heard a word about it tonight. That's why myself and my other friend here came, was to hear what the City Council had to say about this this change in the zoning, in the parking zoning. How do we find out about it? There's zero information available that we can really find. Nothing.
Did you have other I was going to respond to you in a minute, Mr. Owen, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I'm asking you a question. How do we find out about this? It was supposed to be voted on tonight, according to the city website.
Correct. And what I will do is I will ask staff to get with you, because we'll be recessing in just a minute. Because we'll finish public comments and we have no other items on, and to give you further information about that ordinance. And perhaps I could ask the Assistant City Manager or Mr. Klotzel to get with you to give you more information. And usually when the council adopts matters like this, we get information on that website as quickly as we can. So I'm very confident that there will be information on the website regarding it. So we'll get you some additional information.
How would we find it in the rabbit warren that you refer to as a website? Because it looks like a rabbit warren to us. It doesn't to you. You're used to it. But to somebody that's never seen it before, it's like, well.
First things first, I would ask staff to meet with you following going into recess and give you some additional information.
I appreciate that.
Thank you very much for being here. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address City Council on items not on the agenda? On that note, with respect to the Corte Castano matter, as I think one speaker already alluded to, the matter is not on this evening's agenda. So generally speaking, with some exceptions, the Brown Act prohibits action or discussion on our part, of the council's part, of items that are not on the agenda. Madam City Attorney, do you have any brief response for Mr. Hall
Yes,
on this matter?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Mayor. I guess I would indicate that the public comment has been provided, that was provided to the council, has been provided to myself and city staff, and we are absolutely reviewing it, and we'll be in touch with the applicant. I think tomorrow we'll be in contact.
All right, thank you. No other matters, no other public comments for the city council? Let's see, did we have a closed session report? Do you want to do that after we come back from closed session later this evening?
Yes, you're going to be re-adjourning into closed session, I do believe,
Correct.
Performance, but at this time, there's no reportable action.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and adjourn into closed session at this point, or recess into closed session at this point, and thank you very much.
And I'll just have the record reflect that that's as to item A, performance evaluation.
Only as to item A. Thank you.